Good morning. The National Newspaper Publicists Association and Black Press of America welcomes you to the Friday, August 6th edition of Let It Be Known. Building on the ideas introduced in his New York Times best-selling book for white folks who teach in the hood, Dr. Christopher Emdin introduces an alternative educational model that will help students and teachers celebrate ratchet identity in the classroom. His new book, Ratchetdemic, advocates for a new kind of student identity, one that bridges the seemingly disparate worlds of the ivory tower and the urban classroom. Dr. Emdin from Teachers College, Columbia University, joins us live this morning. But first, of course, the headlines. Texas Governor Greg Abbott on Thursday ordered the legislature to reconvene for a third time to try and pass a Republican-backed voter restriction bill that Democratic members blocked by leaving the state nearly a month ago. The announcement, which had been expected, puts new pressure on the more than 50 Democratic lawmakers who left Texas for Washington on July 12th and have remained there since. They have been preparing to celebrate running out the clock on the current 30-day special session that ends Friday, which would torpedo the sweeping elections overhaul for the second time since May. But their holdout may not be over. Some Democrats said this week that they had no intentions of returning to the state capitol even after they returned to Texas and faced possible arrest to compel their attendance. State Rep. Chris Turner, the leader of the House Democratic caucus, would not say following Governor Abbott's announcement whether they would return before the new session begins Saturday, but asked about members who say they will keep refusing to show up. Representative Turner said, "It's very much under discussion. I'll just leave it at that." Of course, Governor Abbott is up for re-election next year, and he's made a new elections package part of a 17-item agenda he instructed the GOP-led legislature to consider over the next month. That, of course, includes voter suppression laws that have swept through the nation, and Texas is among the leaders that have these voter suppression laws. Also in the news, Dr. Fauci says if the U.S. does not get control over community spread of the Delta COVID variant, the nation will continue to see more variants that evade the protection of the vaccines. Dr. Fauci, of course, is the chief medical advisor to the White House, and he says that will happen if we don't get good control over the community spread, which is the reason why I and my colleagues keep saying over again that it is very important to get as many people vaccinated as we possibly can. People who say, I don't want to get vaccinated because it's me and I'll worry about me, I'm not having any impact on anybody else. That's just not the case, Dr. Fauci said. When the virus spreads through the unvaccinated population, as it is doing rapidly now, with low vaccination rates, it can mutate regardless of whether the person gets mild symptoms or even no symptoms at all. And Dr. Fauci goes on to say, and when you give it ample opportunity to mutate, you may sooner or later get another variant, and it is possible that the variant might be in some respects worse than the already very difficult variant we're dealing with now, which is a major reason why you want to completely suppress the circulation of the virus in the community. More than 70% of the adult U.S. population has received at least one dose of a vaccine, and 60.7% of the adults in the U.S. population is fully vaccinated. So we're going to continue to keep our eye on that as this new variant. And then, of course, there's talk in this medical science community that there may be still another variant that is coming from overseas. So we really want to be vigilant about this. Also in the news, the Justice Department opened a civil rights investigation of the Phoenix Police Department on Thursday, looking at whether police use excessive force, treat minorities differently, and deal properly with the disabled and the homeless. Phoenix police have faced lawsuits after lawsuits and widespread complaints over their response to Black Lives Matter protests last year. One lawsuit claims that the police filed false felony charges after rounding up 124 people, chasing them, and firing tear gas. Attorney General Merrick Garland said the investigation will examine whether officers use excessive force, engage in discriminatory policing, violate free expression, respond improperly to people with disabilities, and violate the rights of the homeless by seizing and disposing of their property. Garland and Kristen Clark, the Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division, said the Phoenix mayor and police chief pledged their full support when they were briefed about the investigation yesterday. And so a lot going on there. We've seen the protests. We've seen the police response. We've also seen, unfortunately, the George Floyds of the world in that situation. Here to talk more about that is the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association. Good morning to Dr. Ben Chavis.
Good morning, Stacey Brown. On behalf of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, 230 African-American owned newspapers and media companies all over America, led by our distinguished chair, Karen Carter Richards. This is another Friday, and we're letting it be known.
And Dr. Chavis, we were talking about the situation with the U.S. attorneys, the Department of Justice investigating Phoenix Police Department. Now, you have recently spent a lot of time in Arizona. Can you give us a feel as to what is happening, what the Department of Justice is really looking for here?
Well, the Department of Justice is looking for evidence and data that substantiates systematic racism in law enforcement, not only in Phoenix, but across Arizona. As you know, Phoenix, Arizona has a African-American woman police chief, Chief Williams. And of course, we're very proud to have the Arizona Informant, led by our former chair of the NNPA in Phoenix, Arizona, Clovis Campbell. And so I think that we are on the ground. There's been a lot of protests, police brutality protests there, and they've had some reforms. But what the Justice Department is doing, which we welcome, they're doing a thorough review. You know, during the 4 years of the Trump administration, the Justice Department was idle or refused to do civil rights investigations of police departments. So this is something that's been long overdue, and we welcome it, and we think that it should go on in all the other major police departments around the country, in addition to Phoenix.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, we'll be keeping an eye on that. As you noted, Clovis Campbell of Arizona Informant, that newspaper, of course, will be all over it. And so will blackpressusa.com. You can read a whole lot about it there. And, of course, the Arizona Informant. Dr. Chavis, want to say good morning to all those watching on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and any other platform you might be joining us. Special good morning to Cheryl Smith out in Texas, our distinguished publisher of the iMessenger Media and the Metro News there. And of course, Joni King is watching. Nicole McDaniel, you want to say good morning to Gregory Muhammad, but want to say good morning to our special guest. What is ratchetness, Dr. Chavis, and what is ratchetdemic is really more the key. Dr. Chris Emdin, I said it right before. I'm not going to say it right now, but he joins us this morning from Teachers College, Columbia University, to talk about ratchetdemic. Good morning.
Good morning. It's a really pleasure to be here, and it's also be in presence of Dr. Ben Chavis. I've been following his work as long as I can remember, so I'm humbled to share space with you this morning, sir.
Well, thank you, Dr. Chris. Listen, man, I appreciate the work that you're doing, very formidable work that you're doing at Columbia and other places, helping us to define our reality, help us to define the terms of our reality. And it's so important. And of course, I'm a strong advocate of our culture, and certainly as the extent to which scholars like you help us clarify our culture, I think it helps uplift all of our people. So thank you for your work, man.
Oh, thank you. And to get on the topic of ratchetdemic, it's really an opportunity for us to be able to redefine what academic success and academic excellence looks like. I think for such a long time, for Black folks in Ivy League institutions or other institutions that hold high stature, there's a perception that to be academic requires a taking off of expressions of Black identity. So to be academic requires a very particular discourse, a particular attire, a particular sort of disposition, a particular leaning. And so what oftentimes happens, particularly for young people, is they feel as though they have to take off who they authentically are in pursuit of academic success or academic excellence. And to be ratchetdemic is to redefine that idea, to recognize that Black excellence academically and intellectually does not have a performance of white acceptance. That one can be expressive, one can be loud, one can be emotive, one can talk like their hands, with their hands like I am right now. And so concurrently be academically successful and intellectually proficient. And I think for our young folks in this generation, for so long, they've thought that to be themselves means not to like school. To be themselves means not to be successful academically, to not be seen as intellectual. And we're in this season where we are remarrying ourselves to ourselves, and to recognize that just to wear a hat on a broadcast does not at all define my intellect, does not devalue my PhD. And through this redefining and reimagining, we open up the space for a lot of folks who've been pushed out of schools and pushed out of success to reclaim their legacy as Black intellects. And so, this book helps us to redefine ourselves. It also outlines the ways that schools historically have pushed Black and brown folks out by only allowing you to be educated in particular ways. So historically, you could only be educated as a Black person if you read particular scriptures of the Bible that accepted your subservience. You are only educated if you can only read particular texts. And we're in this new world where it says, Jadakiss and the Loxa had a versus battle the other day. And in that battle, there was complex linguistic expression. There was complex understanding of timing and relatability and connectedness. And that is an exemplar of being ratchetdemic. So we're in a season of reclaiming Black excellence in ways that really marry ourselves to our core genius. And, I'm here for it.
Dr. Emdin, what has been the response? I know the book actually comes out on August the 10th, but what's been the response to your teaching of ratchetdemic?
Well, ratchetdemic is not necessarily welcomed by folks who don't know how to be ratchet, right? What I say to people is this, if you engage in a world with people who only have high credential, they want to judge you based on the credential that you have that is like theirs. But if you're expressing your full core history, there's no way for them to tap into that history. So people are not welcoming a more expressive Black intellectual tradition because they don't have the capacity to be able to tap into it. But those who have been pushed out historically are accepting it. And so, the acceptance of the term, the phrase, the physiology, the sensibility around ratchetdemic depends on who's judging it. Those who can't do it don't like it. Those who've been pushed out love it. And I think as we enter into this new frontier, we have to be comfortable with the discomfort of not making everyone comfortable. But as long as you have the credential, the ability, the intellect, the expressiveness to be able to engage in the highest intellectual forms, then it's okay. And that's what I teach young people right now. Because once you are able to be yourself and be academic, then you learn really quickly how to play the game. The playing the game is not the hard part. The hard part is the self-confidence and the self-will. And the self-will and self-confidence comes with embracing the ratchetdemic identity. Once that's embraced, we play the game quite well. Code switching is simple for folks who have a strong and powerful intellectual tradition. But first, we must teach our young folks to welcome and love themselves. That's the hard part.
Yeah, and educators like yourself around the country, they've been those who have tried to change the course, to try and teach Black history and just about Black society. It's been a lot of pushback. I know you at Teachers College and at Columbia University. What about faculty and staff and the higher ups? Your teaching would be considered controversial. How is that being received there?
My response to that is always this: the responsibility of the scholar and the academic that comes from places not welcome traditionally in academic spaces is to be radical, is to be honest, and to give unapologetic truth-telling. And so while the work may not always be accepted, I don't do this work for the acceptance of institutions. I do the work to construct a legacy that will live beyond me. And so if folks get upset by the expression of being ratchet, let's talk about what to be ratchet is simply to embody all characteristics historically associated with urbanness, with Blackness, with expressiveness. There's nothing in that definition that says not intellectual. And so if folks don't want to accept that, that's on them. we come from a new era, man. In the world of biology, there's a moment of punctuated equilibrium. Punctuated equilibrium is a system or time when instead of having slow evolution of a biological species, there's a rapid movement towards new possibilities. We are in a season of rapid speciation. Young folks are waiting and thirsty and desire to be educated. And schools have not caught up. Systems have not caught up. Institutions have not caught up. And if we don't catch up to where they are, we leave them behind. So, it's my responsibility. It's the responsibility of this network also to create spaces for a more expressive, youthful, energetic approach to engaging in the world. And if folks don't like it, that's going to be okay. The legacy will tell the truth about what needed to be done and when it needed to be done.
Well, Dr. Chris, I've been sitting here smiling as I listen to your expressiveness, as I listen to your articulation of the long-standing evolutionary, which is still evolving, culture of our people,
yes.
Not only in America, but throughout the African diaspora. One of the things that I agree with you, your definition of ratchet and ratchetness and ratchetdemic is, you have your terminal degree. Salute to you. What about those brothers and sisters who have not gained the Ph.D. or the terminal degree? See, you're in a place where you can speak truth to power because you have a credential that not just permits you to speak truth to power, but enables you to speak truth to power.
Yes, sir.
But what I'm thinking about now is those pre-K, first, second, third grade brothers and sisters who come into their classrooms for the first time with a ratchet presentation of who they are, and they automatically get identified as hypertensive. They automatically get identified. They get tracked. Yes. And the next thing you know, somebody's giving them Palitzin or Thorazine or some mind-controlling drug to control their ratchetness,
yes,
if I could use your term. And so by the time, if they even make it to high school, they have been so demeaned, so devalued, so ostracized. And in terms of Black males, I would say even castrated.
yes.
So, can you just speak to what you are teaching is just not for brothers and sisters who are in college, but this whole legacy, we got to fight to get back control of how we're educated. I'm thinking of the book, which some people would not refer to as ratchet, but Frantz Fanon,
yes.
The Wretched of the Earth.
Yes, sir.
You can feel me. And then I saw the verses between Jadakiss Lots and the Dipset. I used to be a member of the Dipsets. I used to introduce Jim Jones albums. But the thing is, because I'm an advocate of hip hop, but can you just speak to the importance of us not only expressing ourselves by the time we get to college, but more importantly, it's important that we build a foundation of expressiveness.
Yes, sir.
The worst thing in the world is to have somebody to stamp out our God-given gifts and talents at a very early age.
Dr. Ben, man, I call you an OG in so many ways, and I love the point you've raised. And here's the interesting thing: we have a dilemma. We either have our young folks expressing their ratchet identities, and then they get sort of ostracized for it, and tracked into the special education system, or we have them learning to perform complicity, and their gifts are trampled and their intellectual pursuits are cut off. So either way, there's a loss, which is why my work is intentional about addressing educators, schools of education, and also elders in the culture, right? We have a collective responsibility to be able to train those who are teaching our babies to recognize the beauty of Blackness and not ostracize young folks when they express themselves by changing the assessments in schools, by changing the curriculum in schools, by recruiting more Black educators who come from these communities to be the ones who teach. So this is not just a solo effort in the sense of going towards those with terminal degrees. What I'm calling for in Ratchetdemic is a reimagining of the entire system that holds all those within that system accountable. So I work directly with teachers. We do teacher training. How do you train a teacher to find their ratchet selves? And their ratchet selves, even if they're white educators who don't come from the community? Because here's the thing, ratchetness is not Blackness. That's another big important thing. Ratchetness is rawness, expressiveness, and a radical honesty. A radical honesty must be expressed by everyone. A lot of the teachers who are invoking the violence on our babies, they themselves have not found their authentic selves. So it's almost, to me, it's a narrative of the Stevie Wonder album. You know, you can't have songs in the key of life unless you first do inner visions. So you cannot teach in the key of life towards a ratchetemic identity until you have a ratchetemic interrogation of self and a reimagining of the structures of schools to welcome a more ratchetemic approach. And so this work is advocating for young folks to have themselves expressed in more powerful ways, but it's also for a reimagining of how we train teachers and also a reimagining of how we structure schools. And let's also be clear, and I talk about this in the book, to talk about Black educators who teach Black children, who themselves are holding up white supremacist ideologies and structures of how schooling should play out, and how we have to hold ourselves as Black folks accountable to how we look at young folks as their full selves as we pursue our own and find our own true selves. And so, you know, ratchetemic is for everyone in the sense of it's for teachers, it's for educators, it's for young people, it's for communities. We all got to collectively heal if we want to get towards Black freedom. And this system, as it's been constructed in K through 12 education and higher education, just ain't gonna do it.
Absolutely. Well, that's why we have the Black press, my dear brother. And that's why we have you on this program. And we're going to continue to stay in touch with you, because I think that you are shedding important light on another aspect. You know, a lot of times when we talk about systemic racism, because of what happened to George Floyd, because of what happened to Sandra Bland or Breonna Taylor, et cetera, we tend to think that systemic racism starts in law enforcement. But it's all of the different systems. It's the education system. It's the health system. It's the criminal justice system. It's the environmental system. All these systems work together to deny our humanity. And that's why in the Black press, we appear sometimes to be quote unquote radical. And we have to be radical in the face of the onslaught of the misinformation, the mischaracterization, and the domination of white supremacy and the narratives that tend to misportray who we are as a people.
Oh, my dear brother. You know, I always tell folks this: a knee on the neck of a Black person as we watch their life lost on screen is gut-wrenching and heartbreaking. We must be as incensed by metaphorical knees on the necks of young folks through curriculum, through standards, through rubrics that choke out the life and the ratchet expression of our babies. And not, just because you view violence on screen, it should rile you up. But man, soul death, emotional death, intellectual death, psychological death that happens in schools daily should get us riled up just as much.
Wow.
Absolutely.
And Dr. Emdin, you also, you taught, well, you're an alumni fellow at the Hutchinson Center at Harvard University, and you served as STEAM ambassador for the U.S. Department of State and Minorities and Energy and ambassador for the U.S. Department of Energy. Talk about, and I'm sure you kind of covered this already, but the importance of STEM and STEAM. People tend to talk about STEM, which is very important, but they also leave out that A sometimes for STEAM.
You know, I always tell STEM is a social justice issue. It's a financial justice issue. We have careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics right now. There, in California alone, 1.6 million jobs projected that make 26 times more money than the average salary, that are waiting for Black and brown bodies who are inherently scientific and mathematical by the way of being in the world, who they don't have the credentials to enter and get those jobs. And so for me, I focus on STEM because I'm an anthobiochemist by training, did work in mesenchymal stem cell research and etiology of schizophrenia. So I'm a scientist by training, but it is gut-wrenching to know that there are opportunities for financial equity. There are opportunities to be able to sort of close that socioeconomic gap for our people if they enter into these professions, and they have the intellect, the ability, and the historical narratives that support their ability to do well. But yet, because schools have failed them, we can't connect. And so when I talk about STEAM, I'm talking about utilizing art and culture as a mechanism to scaffold into careers in STEM. I do a program called Science Genius, where we have young folks in New York City public schools and in Toronto, Canada, and in Jamaica, who are writing raps around the science content that they're learning in the classroom. These kids are bored in the classroom. They write these science raps they science rap battle, and all of a sudden, in one song, have written a complex science rap that covers the entire curriculum for the academic year. So they have the intellectual capability, when we look at the art and the culture of these young folks, to leverage into academic success. The teacher is failing them because they don't welcome the ratchet selves. You bringing a rap hip-hop science program, they showcase their genius. Why aren't we doing this every day? Because we're not being ratchetemic. So for me, I advocate for STEM. I advocate for STEAM. When I think about STEAM, I don't think about highbrow art. I think about art and culture and cultural expressions of historically marginalized people. Look, we need nimbleness. We need creativity. We need innovation. And we need to stop adopting white lenses to accept forms of blackness. And if we can do that, that's the path towards freedom.
Well, we get a lot of comments on what you're saying. Nicole Hines says, that is amazing. James Wright says, there are creative ways to teach math and science. One Facebook user says, it's just that, a system, a collection of ideals and actions that are particularly used against people of color in general. However, Black in particular. And you've seen it a lot. You've seen it all just about, Dr. Emdin. Kind of sum up to us the very point of ratchetemic and the point of what you feel you need to get across to these audiences. And remember, everyone, his book comes out this coming week, August the 10th. So ratchetemic is available to everyone. You can buy it online or any of your favorite retailers, but pick up ratchetemic. But go ahead, Dr. Emdin.
You know, I just want to say to everyone who's listening that we are in a particular moment in time where we can no longer accept being demeaned as acceptance by institutions and by norms. And, you know, the good Dr. Ben Chavis mentioned Frantz Fanon. I will read to you a Frantz Fanon quote that's always stuck with me. I am Black. I am in total fusion with the world, in sympathetic affinity with the earth, losing my id in the heart of the cosmos. I am Black not because of a curse, but because my skin has been able to capture all the cosmic effluvia. I am truly a drop of sun under the earth. To be ratchetemic is to embrace all beautiful and complex aspects of Black expressiveness and culture, to swim in the beauty of who we are as a people, to love the expressiveness of our babies, our music, our art, our culture, our loudness, our veracity, our fervor, is to hold on to all those things they said to put away, and then take those things and bring them to intellectual success, bring them into academia, bring them into K through 12, bring them into science and mathematics, that we can bring our full selves into being intellectual and academic. And when we do so, we redefine what the culture looks like moving forward. We tell our babies that you don't have to choose between hip hop and being a scientist. You can be both. You don't have to choose between being intellectual or being from the hood. You can be both. And when you are both and you swim in the beauty of your Blackness, the world is your oyster. And ratchetemic is just to teach us that the world is ours. I hope you guys pick up the book. It's available wherever books are sold. Ratchetemic, Reimagining Academic Success. My other book for white folks who teach in the hood, and the rest of y'all too, currently available through Beacon Press. And I hope everyone stays in touch with me. You know, reach out to me on social media at Chris Emdin, share critiques, share what you like, share what you didn't like, share what you disagree with. But in that, let's do it with love so we can move towards freedom.
And your social media, your Twitter handle or any other social media you want to give out?
Sure. My Instagram and my Twitter is at Chris Emdin, at ChrisEmdin. I'll respond to all questions, thoughts, opinions on either of those platforms. And then in closing, I just want to thank you guys again for creating this opportunity. You have no idea how humbled I am to be in the presence of Dr. Ben Chavis. I've been a hero of mine and for so long. And just to share space with you, sir, is humbling.
Well, thank you, dear brother. You know, I was asked, what do I do in leisure time? And I said, I read chemistry books. I'm a chemist.
Right.
And people get shocked. So what is wrong with this man? Listen, science is part of who we are as a people. And unfortunately, we have an education system that teaches us and tries to misinform us that we are not scientifically inclined. We are not intellectually inclined. When we're not only inclined, that's our birthright. And I think that we want to stay in touch with you, brother, because to me, and Stacy, what Dr. Chris Emdin is bringing to us is a reminder of why in 1827 and 1827 in March of 16, the Freedom's Journal was first published. And on the front page, it said we have to plead our own cause. You know, we have to express ourselves. You know, at the time there was against chattel slavery, the most inhumane form of slavery the world has ever seen. The Holocaust, the African Holocaust, is still in denial. And so we got a lot of work. The reason why I mentioned Frantz Fanon's book is because back in the day, Dr. Chris, you couldn't be in the movement if you weren't intellectual versed about how we saw the world. And we even had a reading list. You know, you're going to be in the movement. Okay, you got to read these books. You got to be conversant with these books. We need to bring that back. And I will put Ratchet now in the column, Ratchetdemic in the column of those not only pivotal, but required books for our own sanity. You know, there's so much insanity we have to deal with. The way you gain sanity is through self-expression, through self-worth and self-esteem building all of our lives. So God bless you, brother. We're going to stay in touch with the Black press.
Will do, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks again, and apologies to the audience for the many camera problems I'm having this morning. But what a way to...
That's all right. Stacey, you just showing your ratchetness. That's great.
I love it.
And what a way to go into the weekend. And we appreciate Dr. Chris Emdin. Look him up, get the book, and let it be known. Remember this, you are the artist of your own life. Don't hand the paintbrush to someone else. Have a great weekend.